Hi there. Did you know that there are actual mindfulness conferences you could go to? Well, it's true. Come on, let's find out a little bit more. Hi, I'm Ted Meissner, and welcome to Mindfulness Voyage. So glad you could join, and hope you enjoy today's conversation. It's a special episode, and I don't mean this in the 80s sitcom special episode where they get serious because someone's having an intervention. No, special because my guests today are people that I would normally bring on to talk about completely different things. But today, they're going to be talking about the next International Mindfulness Conference. It's true, mindfulness people do have conferences. One of my favorite things to do before I became a teacher was to come to a conference that occurred in Massachusetts. And it wasn't so much the keynote speakers. They were fantastic, and the keynote speakers for what's coming up will be as well. But meeting people, those conversations you'd have in between various sessions, that was amazing. And that made it part of a community. That's not something I get typically through an app or just listening to guided meditation recordings on a website. That's something that happens when you're together with others. So come on, let's find a little bit more about this upcoming International Conference on Mindfulness. Our guests today are Becca Crane. Welcome to the podcast. Good to see you.
Good to be here. Thank you, Ted.
And Ken Lunn. Ken, thank you so much for being here as well.
Great to be here. Thanks, Ted. Yeah.
Now, it's interesting. Both of you have quite a background in mindfulness, and our conversation today is in particular role you have with the International Mindfulness Conference that's coming up. Becca, for you as the conference chair, and Ken, for you as the conference director. So those who are watching or listening to this episode and know you from different works than that know that this is what we're talking about today. And I also want to extend a special thanks to Rachel Smith from the Mindfulness Network for helping set up this conversation. Rachel, thank you very much. It's made a big difference and helped a great deal. So what I'd like to start off with, Ken, maybe we can begin with you on some of the logistics, the basics of where and when is the conference, and it's just some of that stuff.
The conference is going to be held in person in Bangor University, and we're planning to have around about 400 people there. We've got limited capacity, but we're hoping we're going to get around about 400 people there, including speakers. But we don't want to restrict access to the conference just to those who physically can get to Bangor. So we're going to be streaming the conference, and there's going to be some online access to the conference itself. And for those who don't know, Bangor is in North Wales. And for those who are flying there, you can get a train from most airports with just one or two changes to get to Bangor itself. And by the way, I'm sure Becca will tell you it's a beautiful part of the country.
Yeah, Bangor is very near the Snowdonia National Park. It's a stunningly beautiful area of mountains and coastlines.
Wonderful, thank you. And just continuing with this conference idea, and the website has information, and we will be linking to that where the links are found on these podcasts. I'm curious, is this the first one in a while? I seem to recall there was another one maybe a few years ago. And what prompted having one now? What led to that?
Shall I pick that one up, Ken? Yeah, so this is part of the series of conferences, the International Conferences on Mindfulness, ICMs, which started some years back in Rome, and then the baton has been passed year by year. And the pattern now is an alternating one in Europe and then in Australasia. And so it's every other year. It's the aim is to have one in Europe. But the pandemic inevitably disrupted that pattern. So the last one was in Denmark, was intended to be in person, but ended up being online. The one before that was in Amsterdam in 2018. So there has been a pause, and this is the first one back in person since the pandemic. So it feels really special and important that we gather together, at this time when there's so much change in the world and in the mindfulness field. So coming together feels particularly important just now.
Yeah, connection is an important thing that has been really jarringly transformed because of COVID and many people having to go online. Ken, I'm wondering if you have anything just to add about why now and having a conference again.
When Becca got in touch, it's well over 2 years ago, almost 2.5 years ago, about could we host this, the network, Mindfulness Network, and Bangor University. We were still very much in the throes of the pandemic, but there was a thirst then for getting people together, creating connection. So before we settled on the formal themes of the conference, there's been a lot of dialogue about where can we get people together and how can we get a dialogue that goes on not just in the meeting rooms, but in the corridors, in the spaces around. So it's been a key part of the design of the conference as to how we can actually engage people when they turn up at Bangor. And another key part of the development of the conference logistics has been how can we actually include those who are not physically going to be there but joining online so that they feel very much part of the conference activity, and that the people in the various meeting rooms will be able to see those who are joining online as well. So it's very much about creating community at Bangor, whether it's the people there or the people joining remotely.
Yeah. And I want to come back to that theme in a moment of accessibility, because there's so many different layers to that. But first, I want to learn just a little bit more about the structure of the conference. For those who may be watching or listening in, is there are 5 different strands or themes to the conference. And I'm wondering how you landed on those and what some of them are.
Yeah, so whole group that Ken describes over these 2 years, we really explored, what are the challenges, the dilemmas, the issues that we're facing as a community, as a mindfulness community, in terms of moving the work forward, and in the context of the post-pandemic reality, where the climate is very different, the context for our work is hugely different, and I think what became really clear is that the themes that we're all facing on a societal level around the climate crisis, the increasing levels of inequity, are very much the themes that we're navigating within the mindfulness world. Is how can our work really meet the challenge of our time? And so the themes that we landed with were very much both the continuation of mindfulness as an intervention within healthcare, which is where the research has been so successful, but also how can this work widen out and be more responsive to the bigger themes of our time. So we really want to include themes around the sort of social context for mindfulness practice, the ways in which mindfulness can be adapted to meet different communities and different needs and different contexts, the political times that we're in, and what place mindfulness has within that. Yeah.
Ken, anything you'd like to add to any of what Becca has just shared?
No, I think from my other role in the network, what we're seeing is an evolution of mindfulness in terms of its applicability. I think it's been hugely successful in terms of its clinical therapeutic use, but I'm not a clinician. I teach myself in public courses, and there's a much wider applicability and different ways of offering mindfulness that are evolving now. So I think we're offering this conference at a time of great change, And I think and hope the conference is going to help facilitate that change and move mindfulness on and help it to reach new areas and generate a more general understanding of what mindfulness is about in the public eye.
Yeah, we landed on the title "Mindfulness in a Changing World," and we did for a little while think we could call it "Changing Mindfulness in a Changing World," with this sort of sense that actually really there is some need for us to think afresh. But it felt like too many changings in one title, so we landed on "Mindfulness in a Changing World." I think that captures some of the essence of what we want to explore.
Yeah, yeah. So who are some of the speakers that you've got lined up that people might be interested in hearing what they have to say?
Yeah, so each of the themes, the 5 themes of the conference, so the conference is shaped in 5 chunks, and each chunk has a keynote speaker, and then panel discussions, research presentations, workshops, mindfulness practice around those themes. So we have 5 keynote speakers. We open the conference with Sona Demidzian, who's done extraordinary work over many, many years. And in this keynote, we've asked her to do a mapping of mindfulness research to really help us take stock. And I think this is one of the challenges that mindfulness teachers have. How do I digest the research? How do I get a sense of what's out there? Because there's so much out there. And we've asked Sona to help us just kind of get a broad meta perspective of where we're at, where are the strengths of the research, where are what's missing, where are the vulnerabilities, where are we heading from a research perspective. So that's where we're starting. Then Catherine McGee is going to give the second keynote, which is around the contemplative traditions. So really we're sort of exploring this sort of spanning of this work from, integrating the contemplative traditions with the science. And we've asked Catherine to really speak about her beautiful work around the ways that we frame practice and how that changes what we might get from it. And, there may be that in the contemporary mindfulness world, the ways we frame it limits what we're getting. And we want those who are expert in the contemplative aspects of mindfulness to really help us look afresh at how we frame our teaching in the contemporary mindfulness world. And then the third theme is around equity, diversity, inclusion. And we've asked Rhonda McGee to come and speak about, she's done extraordinary work looking at how mindfulness can be a lens to look at the racial injustice. But the theme part of the conference goes way beyond race. We want to look at all aspects of inclusion. But Rhonda's work is a kind of example of that. And the fourth theme is around innovations and applications. And we've asked Professor Amit Bernstein to speak about his work adapting mindfulness for refugees, to look at using that as one example, one of beautiful innovation, to help us explore how innovations can happen in a whole range of areas. And then the final strand is really a sort of gathering of the themes of the conference. And John Kabat-Zinn is going to help us bring together the learning from all of these other strands, as well as Jamie Bristow, who has led the Mindfulness Initiative for many years. And he's bringing a panel together looking at the poly crisis and how, from a political perspective, we can begin to see how mindfulness has a place in helping us navigate what is being termed the poly crisis, the multiple challenges that we're facing on a societal level. So that's a quick kind of sort of walkthrough of a lot of material.
Yeah, and so many ways in which mindfulness touches our lives, that it's not just one thing. It's not just about sitting on the cushion. It really is about how you live the rest of your life. and can have so many points of connection on that. Ken, was there anything you wanted to add to just that talk about some of the speakers and themes?
Just to say, there's a whole range of other people that will be joining as guests or speakers that you'll recognize. We're still going through the abstracts. We expected maybe 70 abstracts for this conference, and I think the total figure that we're considering at present is 167. So it's clearly, in terms of reach, we've got a degree of interest in people wanting to come and talk about their work. But yeah, there'll be lots of other people whose names you will recognize, but I don't want to announce them if they haven't already agreed.
Well, let's come back to this idea of accessibility. And Becca, as you said, it's not just about race. There are so many different layers to accessibility as well. And for those who are watching this, I'm on the committee that is looking at inclusion, diversity, and equity, and an inclusive of things like neurodiversity, people coming from different traditional settings, different kinds of teaching, different contexts of that. Are we clinicians or not clinicians? So one of the core themes that's really underlying the entire conference is, how do people not just feel they've been invited in a formal way, but are an active part of this conference? That's really the intention with this, and not simply declaring safe spaces within it, but actually making people part of that it is from the very beginning warm, inviting, that they are part of this community, this world mindfulness community, because you are, whoever you are watching this, if there's any interest in this, just know that there are so many different ways in which we connect as people, that intersectionality is a thing. We all have different aspects to our lives, and we're doing our very best to honor, not just in a formal way, but in a personal way. Make sure that that is something you get to experience directly within this conference. So also wondering if Becca or Ken, you have anything that you'd like to add to any of that?
Yeah, very beautifully expressed. Thank you, Ted. Yeah, we really want this conference to speak to the themes that we're exploring, and one of those ways to speak to the themes is to have people in the space who haven't perhaps traditionally been at the table, because the only way that mindfulness can be relevant is if the people who are part of the conversations about how this goes forward are actually part of the conversation. So, and we really, although we're, of course, we're bringing in experts who've done beautiful work to share their work. Actually, we see that everybody is an expert. Every person who comes to this conference has a contribution to make, and we want the conference to be a space in which that can be harvested and shared, and there'll be ways within the space that can happen, so that there'll be multiple voices contributing and helping. One of the key visions that we have is that this will really support all of us to move forward in a more resourced way, and a more informed way, and a way that has more nuanced understanding of the issues and challenges and potential solutions to how we enable mindfulness to be more relevant and inclusive, and to have real impact and traction on the big problems that we're facing as a society.
Yeah, thank you, Becca. And I'm also wondering, another layer of this accessibility is just being able to show up, and there are bursaries available. And I'm wondering if one of you might speak just a little bit about that for those who are not in the UK. This means scholarships. That's the rough equivalent to what that is.
Yeah, I mean, we are running a monthly bursary panel who are considering people who request a reduced price for the ticket to turn up at Bangor, and we'll be offering the same also for those who would like a reduced price for the online offering when that's available. And I actually really enjoy that part of this job because we get some lovely stories from all the way around the world. Some of them you wonder how on earth they're going to actually get to Bangor, but they seem to have a dogged determination to come and join. But cost isn't the only thing in terms of barriers, but if we can reduce cost for those who can't afford it, and that includes some people who are barely a short train ride away, who can really benefit and contribute to the conference itself. For those who want to come in from South America, China, the Far East, it's been amazing to hear some of the stories about why people want to come and what benefit it will take back into their communities when they've been at the conference. And, all that is found out. There's a little button on the websites about our bursaries.
Great, thank you. Becca,
I'd
please.
just like to add to what Ken is saying that we really encourage people to apply for a bursary place. So if you feel drawn to being in this space, but for whatever reason you can't, the finances are a barrier, then please apply. Some people exclude themselves thinking it can't possibly mean me, but it really does mean you. So we really encourage people to apply for bursaries if that would support them to be there.
Thank you. And I'd like to get a little bit more personal on this and wondering what is for you, for each of you, exciting about the conference? What are you most looking forward to in this?
Shall I kick off? Yeah.
Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah. So for me, this sense of community feels really important. I mean, I just so strongly feel we can't do this work on our own. It is challenging work. It's the practice is challenging in and of itself, and then to bring this work into the world is a challenging process. And we need the support of each other in navigating this. We're pioneers. We're always at the frontier of what we know, and the only way that we can take the next step is by really connecting with each other to discover how to take that step. And I think the other theme that's alive for me is, it is a time of crisis and challenge in our world, but simultaneously it also feels like a time of huge opportunity and opening. So these practices are connecting and flowering in the world in a way that has not happened before. That so many people are connecting in mindfulness and finding mindfulness a supportive anchor in their life. And it feels like this practice has huge relevance to our time. And I feel really excited about that and really want us to optimize how we offer mindfulness in the world. Yeah.
Thank you, Becca. How about for you, Ken? What are you really looking forward to?
Well, the excitement is there. I mean, there's the positive excitement and the negative excitement. The negative is, oh my goodness, how are we going to make all this work? And I do wonder how dare we possibly think of doing this. But on the positive side, I think already for me, it's showing that mindfulness is not this little group of practitioners tucked away somewhere. Already from the level of interest on the bursaries, on the number of people who are wanting to come and speak, that there's a real interest in mindfulness out there, which is much wider than I'd expected. And I think there is a sense I have of the field changing. We can either look back and say, how can we make what we were doing over the last 10 years work better and get more people in, or we can really rethink the appeal of mindfulness and the application of mindfulness. And I think the excitement there is getting a group of really committed, interested people with such diverse perspectives together. And I think the dialogue is not just what will happen at Bangor between the 2nd and the 6th of August. It's the dialogue that will continue. It's the connections that are made that will be really important.
Just adding on to that, Ken, one of the things that I'm looking forward to most, having been at conferences on mindfulness before, is while the poster sessions and the research and the other themes that have been mentioned here, the formal talks and all of that, that's wonderful. But what I really, really enjoy the most and what I get the most out of from these kinds of conferences, for those times in between, is those conversations you have, Becca, as you said, this community, being able to chat with people in between. And I know that that's something that we're trying to facilitate with this conference, is enabling people to have those moments and establish those connections that are not when we're formally sitting in a room listening to a keynote speaker, but when we're walking around and just having informal conversations at tables that we'll have available for this, to get to know one another and establish those kinds of connections. That's one of the things I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, thank you, Ted. I'd just like to add to that. It's been so wonderful through the pandemic to have discovered online ways of teaching. But that's the piece that we miss, I think, is that those kind of in-between moments. You don't get that when we're teaching on Zoom. So I totally agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. So one last question before a wrap up is, what are you, each of you, most hoping attendees get out of the conference, whether they're there in person or if they need to attend virtually? What's one of your aspirations that you're hoping people will get out of this?
My hope is that they will get inspiration and tangible ideas for how they can move their mindfulness teaching and practice to a new level of impact and traction in the communities that they're working in.
For me, I think it's something around mindfulness being real and meaningful, not just for the handful of people who sit down on a cushion or meditate regularly, but it actually has real impact way beyond the immediate and obvious impact.
Yeah. Anything else each of you would like to share with the listeners about the conference, or really anything else that's coming to heart or mind?
I think the thing that's striking me about the logistics is, and we're having a debate at present about which streams we run in parallel, and we're going to be recording all the formal talks, and we're going to be recording the panel sessions. So if you torn between two sessions, you won't necessarily miss out. I think this is I've never personally had that experience at a conference in my life. So actually the opportunity to fully engage with the conference during and after is, I think, really important and really valuable.
Becca, how about for you? What do you want to share with the listeners?
Yeah, well, I just really hope that the listeners will be inspired to be a participant in this, because we need you, we need each other, and it would be so lovely if this gathering is a catalyst for coming together in ways that really make a difference.
Very well said. Well, our guests today are Becca Crane, Conference Chair for the International Mindfulness Conference. Becca, thank you for being here.
Delighted to have been part of this. Thank you, Ted.
And Ken Lunn, Conference Director for the International Mindfulness Conference.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ted, for organizing this.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. I'm glad you could join us on Mindfulness Voyage for this particular episode. And again, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time.